Okay, wow. So this is pretty heavy stuff you send over, this stack of articles about Sean Diddy Combs. We've got, let's see, excerpts from Today News, The Economic Times, AP News. There's even a Forbes deep dive in here. And it's pretty clear that things have gotten really complicated for Diddy. Multiple lawsuits, serious accusations, and a lot of big names are involved in this. So our mission today is to try to break down what's going on here, who all is involved, and what this all means for Diddy, his whole legacy, and for the music industry too.
Yeah, and I think what's really fascinating to me is that we're not just looking at like a few isolated incidents here. This isn't, just some PR hiccup. I mean, these accusations, they really paint a picture of potential misconduct that goes back decades. I mean, all the way back to the 90s.
Right, yeah, and it seems like it all kind of came crashing down with that arrest back on September 16th of this year. Racketeering, sex trafficking, even transporting someone for prostitution. I mean, those are some really heavy charges.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that he's being held without bail at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn really speaks volumes. I mean, that place is notorious. It's a far cry from the lavish world that we all know Diddy for. And plus, you know this, he's sharing a unit with Sam Bankman-Fried, the cryptocurrency guy.
Oh, wow, are you serious? That's just bizarre. It's like some kind of reality show that no one asked for.
It really is, but it also just kind of highlights this idea that no matter how rich or famous you are, the legal system can, it can still catch up to you.
Yeah, no, for sure. And since that arrest, it's like a dam broke. There are over 120 lawsuits that have been filed against Diddy now, alleging everything from sexual assault and rape to even, drugging and abuse. Some of these accusations go all the way back to like the peak of his Bad Boy Records days.
It's true, and that's what makes this whole thing so complicated. If these accusations are true, it suggests a pattern of behavior that was potentially ignored or even covered up for a very long time.
Yeah, there's one lawsuit in particular that's just really disturbing. It claims that Diddy drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl back in 2000. And get this, with other unnamed celebrities allegedly present.
Wow, yeah, that's an extremely serious accusation. And if proven true, it would point to, well, a level of depravity and a culture of complicity that's honestly just horrifying.
For sure. It's just awful.
Yeah.
But of course, Diddy and his legal team they're fighting back hard. They're denying all of it, calling the lawsuits baseless, saying they're just attempts to exploit his wealth and fame. Even his mother, Janice Combs, has stepped in, comparing his situation to people who've been wrongfully convicted,
Yeah.
and saying the accusers are just, they're just after money. What do you make of that kind of defense strategy?
It's pretty common, actually, in high-profile cases like this. You try to discredit the accusers, paint them as opportunists. It's a way to sow doubt in the minds of potential jurors. But it can be a risky strategy. If the evidence is strong enough, it can backfire and make Diddy appear unsympathetic.
Right, and the evidence isn't just coming from alleged victims here. A lot of these lawsuits name other celebrities, too, either as alleged participants or even just as witnesses. We're talking Aaron Hall, Cuba Gooding Jr., Justin Dior Combs, Jacob the Jeweler, Young Miami, Stevie J, Kalena Harper, even Jimmy Iovine, Lucian Grange, even Prince Harry's name gets thrown in there.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And while we do have to emphasize that just being named in a lawsuit doesn't equal guilt, the sheer number of high-profile individuals mentioned really paints a troubling picture of the social circles that Diddy moved in and the culture that may have enabled this alleged behavior. It raises questions about who knew what and when.
Yeah, it does. It's like we're looking at this massive puzzle, and each lawsuit is a new piece. And the image is getting more and more disturbing with each new piece. But even with all of these names swirling around, there was one accuser that really kind of stands out. Cassie Ventura, Diddy's ex-girlfriend.
Right, and her lawsuit, which was filed back in November of 2023, alleges years of physical and emotional abuse, including a particularly disturbing incident that was captured on a surveillance video in 2016.
Oh, right, yeah, the hotel hallway video. That was all over the news.
It was, and it's hard to deny what you see on that tape. It shows Diddy physically assaulting Cassie, grabbing her by the hair, even kicking her. That video is, it's damning evidence, and it's going to be very hard for his legal team to explain away.
Right. And to make this whole situation even crazier, Netflix has jumped into the fray. They've got a docuseries in the works about all of this. And it's being produced by, of all people, 50 Cent, who has been very outspoken about this whole case.
Yeah, and 50 Cent has actually pledged to donate any profits from the series to victims of sexual assault. So it seems like he's making his stance pretty clear.
Wow. Well, it'll definitely be fascinating to see how that docuseries shapes public opinion. It's already
Yeah.
got everyone talking. But beyond just the immediate trauma here, this case has really sparked some important conversations, don't you think? About, power dynamics, consent, accountability in the music industry, and really just beyond. Do you think this could be some kind of turning point?
I do think it has the potential. I mean, the music industry, like a lot of other industries, it has a history of sweeping these kinds of allegations under the rug. But with the sheer volume of accusations here, the high-profile individuals that are involved, and the public scrutiny that this case is receiving, I think it's going to be very difficult for those in power to ignore it this time.
Yeah, you're right. It's impossible to ignore. So where do we even go from here? What happens next? This is just the beginning,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely. The legal battles are they're just getting started. And there are so many potential outcomes to consider. I mean, Diddy could be acquitted of all charges, or he could be found guilty and face a lengthy prison sentence. It's all still very much up in the air.
Feels like we're watching a train wreck in slow motion, honestly. But let's shift gears a little bit and unpack these freak-off parties that Today News mentioned.
Yeah.
They sound pretty wild.
They do, yeah, and they're a crucial part of the story because they provide context for the alleged culture surrounding Diddy.
Right. The article mentions a former drug dealer who claims that when he arrived at one of these parties, hookers and many other guests were already high on ketamine and GHB. It paints a well, it paints a very disturbing picture.
It certainly does, and it raises questions about whether these parties were simply places for just hedonistic indulgence, or if they were environments where vulnerable individuals could be exploited.
Yeah. And the list of celebrities who allegedly attended these parties is just, it's mind-blowing. Leonardo DiCaprio, Ashton Kutcher, Paris Hilton, even Beyoncé and Jay-Z. The guest list reads like a Hollywood who's who.
It's true. And again, just being at a party doesn't mean that someone was involved in any wrongdoing. But the sheer star power associated with these events it does add another layer of complexity to this story. It highlights the power and influence that Diddy seemingly wielded within the entire entertainment industry.
It also makes you wonder about the level of complicity. If these parties were as wild and out of control as they're being described, how could so many people have been present and not known what was allegedly happening?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that investigators are likely trying to answer.
Right, yeah. Well, the Today News article also mentions a lawsuit that alleges Diddy sexually assaulted a 16-year-old boy at one of his infamous white parties back in 1998.
Yeah, and that's just one of 6 new lawsuits that have been filed against Diddy just this past October. It seems like every week brings a new accusation. It's truly disheartening to see someone who was once revered as a music icon and a successful entrepreneur now facing such serious allegations.
It is. It is. It's a reminder that power and success don't make you immune to consequences. But let's move on to the Forbes article, because they really break down the specific accusations in a way that's both helpful and incredibly disturbing.
Yeah, I agree. It's important to understand the full scope of what Diddy is being accused of. And the Forbes article really, it lays it all out in this detailed timeline going all the way back to the early 90s.
Right. One of the allegations that really stood out to me was the claim that he exposed himself to a man at a launch party for his Ciroc vodka brand back in 2022. The lawsuit even says that an unnamed professional athlete had to step in to, quote, end the assault.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really significant detail, I think, because it reminds us that sexual assault isn't limited to any one gender. Anyone can be a victim.
Right. And it also shows that these alleged incidents weren't just confined to private parties or secluded locations. They were happening in public, in professional settings, surrounded by people.
Exactly. It paints a picture of someone who may have felt, untouchable, above the rules.
Yeah. The Forbes article also describes a lawsuit filed by a man who worked security in the music industry back in 2005. He claims he was pressured into drinking a drugged beverage at a party and then sexually assaulted by Diddy.
That's particularly concerning because it suggests a level of premeditation and a willingness to use his power and influence to coerce someone into a situation where they're vulnerable.
Yeah, it's like he was using his position to create a trap.
Yes, and that's incredibly disturbing. But perhaps the most horrifying lawsuit detailed in the Forbes article is the one filed by a woman who claims she was, quote, violently gang raped by Diddy and his accomplices in 2018.
Right, that's the one where she alleges she was targeted. after she told Diddy on a FaceTime call that she thought he was involved in the 1996 killing of Tupac Shakur.
Right.
Yes. It's a truly shocking accusation. If true, it suggests a level of brutality and a willingness to use violence as retaliation. That's just, I mean, it's chilling. It's hard to believe that someone who was once considered a cultural icon could be capable of such heinous acts.
It's a complete 180 from the image she cultivated for so long.
Yeah.
But, as we've seen time and again, fame and power can corrupt even the most seemingly virtuous individuals.
Definitely. And the Forbes article does, it does give us a glimpse into Diddy's legal strategy.
Mhm.
His lawyers are painting many of these lawsuits as nothing more than baseless attempts to extort money from him, using his fame and wealth against him. Right. It's a common defense tactic.
Mm.
But will it work? I mean, there's that surveillance video of him attacking Cassie Ventura. That's pretty hard evidence to refute.
Yeah. That video it's incredibly disturbing to watch. It clearly shows Diddy, being physically aggressive and violent with Cassie. He initially tried to downplay the incident, but he eventually issued a public apology.
Which, from what I remember, felt, I don't know, a little bit forced and insincere. I think it further damaged his public image. I mean, he even lost business partnerships and endorsements because of that video.
Yeah.
Howard University even took back an honorary degree that they'd given him. They even disbanded a scholarship program in his name.
Wow. Yeah, that speaks to the tangible consequences of these accusations. They're not just rumors or whispers anymore. They're having a real impact on his life and career. And it's a reminder that even the rich and famous they aren't above the law.
No, they're not. And this isn't even his first brush with the law. I mean, back in 1999, he was arrested on weapons charges after that shooting incident at a New York City nightclub.
Oh, right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
while that incident resulted in a mistrial, it definitely tarnished his reputation. It raises questions about whether he has a history of violent behavior and whether he's able to control his impulses.
Yeah, for sure. And the Forbes article also mentions that 2017 lawsuit from his former personal chef, Cindy Roeda, who accused him of sexual harassment.
Right. And that case was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Rueda alleged that Diddy made her prepare and serve food to him and his guests while they were engaged in sexual activity.
It's a very disturbing accusation.
Yeah.
And it suggests he may have used his power and wealth to create a hostile work environment.
Absolutely. It reminds us that sexual harassment doesn't always have to be, overt or aggressive. It can be subtle, manipulative, and exploitative.
Right. It seems like with all of these allegations and legal troubles, his future is, well, it's pretty uncertain. It's hard to imagine him ever fully recovering from all of this.
It's true. His reputation has taken a huge hit, and he's facing a mountain of legal challenges. It's certainly possible he could end up serving time in prison.
It's a really sad and shocking fall from grace for someone who was once considered one of the, one of the most powerful figures in the music industry. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one detail from the Forbes article that I think is worth mentioning. It's a quote from his mother, Janice Combs, where she admits that her son, quote, may have been not entirely truthful in the past when denying allegations of assault raised by Cassie Ventura.
Wow, that's a significant admission. It's just that even his own family may have doubts about his innocence.
It is. It's a really heartbreaking situation all around. And it's a stark reminder that actions have consequences no matter who you are. What stands out to you about this situation?
Yeah.
Given everything that we've just discussed.
Honestly, it's the sheer breadth of the allegations. It's not just one or two isolated incidents. We're looking at a pattern of alleged behavior that spans decades, and it involves numerous victims. It's a disturbingly consistent narrative.
You're absolutely right. There seems to be a clear pattern here.
And what's even more troubling is that many of these alleged incidents took place in settings where Diddy held a significant power advantage over his accusers, at parties that he hosted, in professional settings where he was the boss, situations where people may have felt pressured to go along with whatever he wanted.
It's a classic example of how power dynamics can be used to manipulate and exploit others. And it raises the question of complicity. Were others aware of his alleged behavior? Why didn't anyone speak up sooner?
Those are difficult questions, and they point to a much larger issue of accountability, not just in the music industry, but in society as a whole. We need to create a culture where people feel safe speaking out against those in power, where victims are believed and supported.
Yeah, well said. It's clear we have a long way to go in terms of achieving true justice and equality. But let's pause here for a moment and take a break. We'll pick this conversation back up in part 2 of our deep dive.
You know, one thing that keeps coming up in these articles is the legal strategy that Diddy's team is using. The AP News article, for example, mentions that they're now trying to force the court to reveal the identities of his accusers.
Really? That seems, I don't know, like kind of a risky move. I mean, it's understandable that he'd want to know who's making these accusations against him, but wouldn't that discourage other potential victims from coming forward?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a tactic that's often used in these types of cases, and it's incredibly controversial. I mean, on the one hand, the accused does have the right to confront their accusers, but on the other hand, revealing the identities of those alleging abuse, well, it can be incredibly intimidating, you know? It can make them feel vulnerable, exposed, and it could even, make others who might be considering coming forward, make them think twice.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, and it makes you question Diddy's motives a little bit. Is this about genuinely wanting to defend himself, or is it more of a power play to try to silence his accusers?
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure, but the optics definitely aren't great, especially when you consider, what else is going on with the case. The AP News article also mentions that his trial on the sex trafficking charges, it's set for May 2025. That's a long way off, which means this is going to be a long and drawn out process for everyone that's involved.
Yeah, that's a long time. And with so much at stake here, I mean, we're talking about the potential downfall of a music icon. The Forbes article goes into Diddy's attempts to secure bail while he awaits trial. His lawyers argued that the conditions of the Metropolitan Detention Center were, quote, horrific,
Yeah.
and they offered a $50 million bond and even GPS monitoring.
Oh, but
Nice.
the judge wasn't convinced. The concern was that someone with Diddy's wealth and connections could easily try to interfere with the case or even flee the country. It's a reminder that in the eyes of the law, money and fame they don't grant you special privileges. Everyone is held to the same standard.
Right, right. Speaking of money and fame, there's something else in the Forbes article that I found really, I don't know, I found it really interesting. Diddy's lawyers are trying to frame this whole thing as a takedown of a successful black man. They're even suggesting that the Department of Homeland Security leaked that surveillance video of him assaulting Cassie Ventura.
Oh, wow. That's a very loaded argument. It's a way of kind of deflecting criticism, painting him as a victim of some sort of conspiracy.
But it's important to remember that there's no evidence to support that claim about the video leak. It feels like I don't know, it feels like a desperate attempt to shift the focus away from the actual accusations.
Right. It's a classic diversion tactic. You create a distraction and hope that people don't look too closely at the evidence. But you can't ignore the facts. And in this case, the evidence against him seems pretty compelling.
I agree. And we have to be careful not to let these attempts to racialize the narrative,
Yeah.
to let those cloud our judgment. I mean, this isn't about race. It's about accountability. Did he or did he not commit these acts? That's the question that needs to be answered.
Exactly. And that's where that Netflix docuseries comes in, right? It's mentioned in several of these articles. I'm really curious to see what 50 Cent does with it. I mean, he's certainly not afraid to speak his mind. Right. He's definitely known for being outspoken and controversial. So I'm sure the docuseries it'll generate a lot of buzz. It has the potential to shape public opinion in a big way. But we do have to remember that it's just one perspective. It's entertainment, not a court of law.
Right, right. Good point. It's easy to get swept up in the drama of it all.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is a serious matter with potentially life-altering consequences. Real people have been hurt here.
Mm.
And we need to, I don't know, we need to treat this situation with the gravity that it deserves.
I agree. Yeah. And it's important to avoid speculating or gossiping about the case. We need to let the legal process play out and respect the privacy and dignity of everyone that's involved.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. One thing that really struck me as we were going through these articles was the sheer number of alleged victims. The Economic Times article mentions that attorney Tony Busby claims to be representing 120 individuals who have accused Diddy of sexual misconduct. I mean, that's a staggering number.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And it speaks to a pattern of behavior that's incredibly disturbing. Now, it's important to note that, not all of those individuals have actually filed lawsuits, and some of the alleged incidents may even be beyond the statute of limitations. But the fact that so many people have come forward is, it's a testament to the courage of survivors and the importance of believing their stories.
It is. It's a reminder that we need to create a society where victims feel safe speaking out and where perpetrators are held accountable no matter how, how powerful or influential they may be.
Absolutely. And this case has the potential to spark real change, not just in the music industry, but in all areas of society.
You mentioned the statute of limitations earlier. Can you explain what that means and why it even matters in this case?
Sure. So, a statute of limitations is basically a time limit for filing a lawsuit. It varies depending on the type of crime and the jurisdiction. So, so if an alleged crime happened too long ago, the victim might be barred from seeking legal action. The idea behind statutes of limitations is that while evidence can disappear over time, memories can fade, witnesses become unreliable, and it can make it difficult to have a fair trial.
So in Diddy's case, some of these accusations might be too old to actually prosecute.
It's a possibility. However, there's a growing movement to extend or even eliminate statutes of limitations
Right.
for certain crimes, particularly those that involve sexual assault. There's a growing understanding that trauma can have a profound impact on memory. And it can take years for victims to process what happened and feel ready to come forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not easy to speak out about these kinds of experiences, especially when the accused is, someone as powerful and influential as Diddy.
It takes immense courage, and that's why it's so crucial to create a culture where survivors feel supported and believed,
Yeah.
regardless of how much time has passed.
Yeah, and what about Diddy's career? Can he ever really recover from all of this? I mean, his reputation has taken, a massive hit.
It's hard to say. His legacy is, it's forever tarnished by these allegations. The music industry has a long and troubled history with sexual misconduct, and this case is, well, it's likely to have a lasting impact on how these issues are addressed moving forward.
Yeah. Do you think this could be a turning point for the industry? Could it lead to, you know, real and meaningful change?
I believe it has the potential. The hashtag Me Too movement has brought about,
Good.
a greater awareness of these issues, and there's a growing demand for accountability. But
Mhm.
real change requires more than just awareness. It requires a fundamental shift in attitudes and behaviors.
Right. So what kind of changes are we talking about?
Well, we need to create a culture of consent where everyone understands and respects boundaries. That means, educating young people about healthy relationships, promoting open communication, and challenging the harmful gender stereotypes that often contribute to these problems.
Yeah, those are all important steps. But what about holding perpetrators accountable? How do we ensure that those who engage in sexual misconduct face real consequences?
Well, for starters, we need to strengthen laws and policies that protect victims and punish offenders. We need to make sure that victims have access to, support services and legal representation,
Well,
and we need to make sure that perpetrators face meaningful consequences, including criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and professional sanctions.
it sounds like there's a lot of work to be done. But I'm hopeful that this case can be a catalyst for positive change.
I am too, yeah. This is a watershed moment, I think. And it's an opportunity to create a more, a more just and equitable world for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. Before we move on, I want to go back to something you said about the impact of trauma on memory. The Forbes article mentions a lawsuit filed by a woman who claims that Diddy drugged and raped her back in 2004. She says the incident left her feeling, quote, paralyzed and trapped in her own body.
Right, and that's a common response to trauma. The body and mind have, they have powerful defense mechanisms that kick in during a traumatic event. Those mechanisms can help us survive in the moment, but they can also lead to, fragmented memories, emotional numbing, and difficulty processing what
So,
happened.
so it's possible that some of Diddy's accusers may not have,
Yeah.
clear or complete memories of the alleged assaults.
Exactly. Trauma can affect memory in very complex ways, and it's
Yeah.
important to understand that. A lack of memory doesn't mean that an assault didn't occur.
Right. Yeah. That's a really important point. We need to be sensitive to the fact that trauma can manifest in different ways and that everyone processes it at their own pace.
Yeah, and it's also important to remember that, false accusations of sexual assault they're incredibly rare. Studies have shown that only a tiny percentage of reported cases are actually found to be false.
So the vast majority of people who come forward with allegations of sexual assault are telling the truth.
That's right. It's crucial that we believe survivors and create a safe and supportive environment for them to share their stories.
Yeah, for sure. The Forbes article also mentions a lawsuit filed by a man who claims that Diddy drugged him and sexually assaulted him at a party back in 2021. He says he felt trapped in his own body
Yeah.
and couldn't resist.
That's a particularly disturbing allegation because it raises the issue of, the issue of consent when someone is drugged or incapacitated. They can't give meaningful consent to sexual activity. Any sexual contact under those circumstances is considered assault.
Right. It's a clear violation. And it underscores the importance of ensuring that,
They're
that everyone involved in a sexual encounter, fully conscious and able to consent.
Absolutely. Consent is about, it's about communication, respect, and agency. It's not something that can be assumed or coerced.
Right. There's another incident mentioned in the Forbes article that I wanted to ask you about. It's not directly related to the sexual misconduct allegations,
Yeah.
but it involves Diddy's ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura and rapper Kid Cudi. The lawsuit claims that Diddy became enraged after Cassie and Kid Cudi started working on music together.
Yeah.
And retaliated by blowing up a car owned by Kid Cudi.
Wow, yeah. While it's not directly related to the sexual misconduct allegations, it does, I think, provide insight into Diddy's alleged behavior and temperament.
Right. It suggests a pattern of aggression,
Yep.
a lack of impulse control,
Yeah.
and a willingness to lash out in extreme ways.
Exactly. It paints a picture of someone who may struggle with anger management and who may resort to violence or intimidation when,
Yeah.
when he feels threatened or challenged.
Yes.
Mm.
It's interesting, though, because the AP News article mentions that Diddy's music streams actually increased after his arrest and indictment. You'd think with all this negative publicity that his popularity would plummet.
It is surprising, yeah. But sometimes, negative publicity can have the opposite effect. It can make people curious, and it can even generate sympathy or support.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that some people are listening to his music out of morbid curiosity, or that they're trying to separate the art from the artist.
Right. Yeah. That's an important distinction to make. You could appreciate someone's creative work without condoning their personal behavior.
Absolutely. We don't have to choose between enjoying an artist's music and holding them accountable for their actions.
Right. The AP News article also highlights the impact that this case is having on Diddy's business ventures. It says that he's sold off his stake in Revolt, the media company that he founded back in 2013.
Wow, that's a significant move. It suggests that he's feeling the financial pressure of these allegations and that he may be trying to distance himself from certain aspects of his empire.
Right. It's a reminder that there are
Yeah.
real-world consequences to these accusations, even for someone as wealthy and powerful as Diddy.
Definitely. And it's a sign that the tide may be turning in terms of, how society views sexual misconduct. In the past, powerful individuals were often able to, escape accountability. But now there's a greater willingness to believe survivors and to hold perpetrators responsible no matter who they are.
Yeah, you're right. We touched on this earlier, but the Forbes article mentions that Diddy is currently sharing a unit at the Metropolitan Detention Center with Sam Bankman-Fried. It's such an unlikely pairing.
It is, yeah. But it's a reminder that the justice system, in theory at least, applies to everyone equally, no matter your wealth, your status, or your profession. You're subject to the same laws and procedures.
Right. It's a powerful symbol of equality.
Yeah.
Even though,
Yeah.
we know the reality is often much more complicated.
Yes, the legal system is, it's far from perfect, but it's the best mechanism we have for holding individuals accountable and ensuring that justice is served.
Yeah. This case has definitely sparked a lot of important conversations about, fame, power, accountability. It's forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about how we treat survivors of sexual assault and how we hold, those in positions of authority accountable for their actions.
Definitely. It's a conversation that's long overdue, and I'm hopeful that it will lead to, to meaningful and lasting change.
Me too. But it's important to remember that, this case is just one example of a much larger problem. Sexual assault and harassment are, they're pervasive in our society, and they affect people of all genders, races, and socioeconomic backgrounds.
You're absolutely right. This case has received a lot of attention because of,
Right.
because of Diddy's celebrity status. But there are countless survivors out there who don't have who don't have a platform or a voice. We need to remember them and fight for their justice as well.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to
Yeah.
create a world where everyone feels safe and supported, and where justice is, where justice is truly accessible to all.
That's a powerful and important goal to strive for.
The AP News article mentions that the Bureau of Prisons has, they've increased staffing and made some improvements in the Metropolitan Detention Center. In response to, criticism about the poor conditions there and the violence. It's good to hear that they're at least taking steps to address those issues.
It's definitely a step in the right direction. No one should have to endure inhumane treatment while incarcerated. It's
Yeah.
important to remember that even those accused of crimes deserve to be treated with basic human dignity.
Yeah, for sure. And we can't forget the role that social media has played in all of this, too. As the AP News article points out, many of these allegations against Diddy have been, they've shared and discussed online. And the public outcry has been intense.
Yeah, social media can be a powerful tool for raising awareness about important issues like this.
Yeah.
It can give a voice to survivors and help you know, to hold perpetrators accountable, but it's also important to use it responsibly. We need to be careful about spreading misinformation or engaging in online harassment.
Right, yeah. It's a double-edged sword. We have to use our voices wisely and make sure we're not contributing to the problem.
Exactly. It's about, using our platforms for good, amplifying the voices of survivors, and demanding justice and accountability.
Right. This case has also, kind of sparked a debate about the role of race in the justice system. Diddy's lawyers are claiming he's being unfairly targeted because he's a successful black man, while others argue that, that race is irrelevant to the allegations against him.
It's a complex and sensitive issue, and there's no easy answer. Systemic racism undeniably exists in our society, and Black people are. They're disproportionately affected by the criminal justice system. But it's important to avoid making generalizations or assumptions about individual cases based solely on someone's race.
Right. Yeah. So we need to focus on the facts of the case and not let racial biases cloud our judgment.
Exactly. It's about looking at the evidence, listening to the victims, and ensuring that justice is served, regardless of anyone's, race, wealth, or social status. This case has raised a lot of important questions about sexual misconduct, accountability, and the role of the media in shaping public opinion. It's a conversation that we need to continue having, both online and offline.
Yeah, I agree. This is not just about Diddy. It's about, creating a society where these kinds of abuses are no longer tolerated, where survivors feel empowered to speak out, and where perpetrators are held accountable for their actions.
It's about changing the culture, challenging power imbalances, and working towards a future where everyone feels safe and respected.
Yeah. This has been a really, informative and eye-opening deep dive. Thank you for, thank you for helping me understand this complex situation.
You're very welcome. It's important to stay informed and to engage in these difficult conversations.
Well, before we
Okay.
get to our final thoughts on this case, there's still some loose ends that we need to tie up. Let's move on to part 3 and see what other insights we can uncover. It's hard not to feel like, as we're piecing together this whole story about Diddy, that we're uncovering a system that allowed this behavior to go unchecked for so long.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I mean, these accusations don't exist in a vacuum. They really point to a larger culture of, exploitation and abuse that may extend far beyond Diddy himself.
Yeah, especially when you consider like those freak-off parties that Today News was describing. They sound, I don't know, more like scenes from a dark Hollywood movie than just, casual get-togethers.
And it's not just
Yeah.
the wild accusations themselves, it's the alleged context. Like you said, a former drug dealer claiming he witnessed people already high on ketamine and GHB. I mean, suggesting a level of just reckless abandon and potential disregard for consent.
Right. And that list of celebrities who allegedly attended these parties, it's like a who's who of the entire entertainment industry. Leonardo DiCaprio, Beyonce, industry titans like Jimmy Iovine and Lucien Grange. I mean, their names being linked to these events.
Yeah.
Even just as attendees, it raises serious questions about, about what they may or may not have witnessed.
Yeah, and it's important to emphasize, of course, that just,
Yeah.
just being present at a party doesn't implicate anyone in any wrongdoing, but the sheer volume of high-profile individuals that are mentioned here, it does make you wonder about the level of awareness surrounding Diddy's.
Surrounding Diddy's alleged behavior.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
was this an open secret? Did people, I don't know, did people turn a blind eye because of his power and influence? It's unsettling to think about. Yeah. And
Mhm.
power dynamics play a huge role in situations like this. It's possible that some people felt pressured to attend these parties or to stay silent about what they,
Mhm.
what they witnessed for fear of,
Of jeopardizing their careers or their social standing.
yeah, for sure. The Forbes article mentions an incident where Diddy allegedly paid a hotel $50,000 for surveillance footage of him assaulting Cassie Ventura. If that's true, it shows a blatant attempt to cover up his actions and silence his victim.
Right. It's a chilling detail, isn't it? It speaks to I don't know, a sense of entitlement and
Yeah.
a willingness to use wealth and influence to manipulate situations to his advantage.
And it reinforces this idea that abusers often, go to great lengths to protect themselves and maintain control. This case is, I mean, it's about so much more than just one man's alleged actions. It's forcing us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the systems that protect powerful individuals and silence victims. I completely agree, and it brings us back to that central question: what happens next? What are the potential outcomes, and what does this all mean for Diddy's legacy?
Yeah, and the AP News article touched on something that's been weighing on my mind: the impact of all of this on his music. Diddy was once considered
Uh,
a pioneer,
yeah.
a visionary who helped shape the sound of hip hop.
Oh yeah, his contributions to the music industry are, I mean, they're undeniable, but these allegations have they've cast a dark shadow over his achievements. It's a stark reminder that we can't separate an artist's work from their character, their actions.
Right. It raises a tough question for fans. Can we still enjoy his music knowing what we know now? It's a personal decision, and I don't think there's
Yeah.
a right or wrong answer.
Yeah. Some people might choose to, to boycott his music altogether. Others might, find a way to compartmentalize, separate the art from the artist. It's a complex issue with no easy solutions.
Yeah, this whole situation it's a tragedy on multiple levels. It's a tragedy for the alleged victims who have endured, unimaginable pain. It's a tragedy for Diddy,
Yeah.
who has potentially, squandered his legacy and thrown away everything he worked for.
It's a cautionary tale about about the dangers of unchecked power.
Yeah.
And the importance of living a life, I think, guided by integrity and respect for others.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the takeaway? What should we be thinking about, considering, even doing differently based on what we've learned?
For me, it's a call to action. I think we all have a responsibility to speak out against injustice, to challenge power imbalances, to believe survivors, and to hold those in positions of authority accountable for their actions.
It's about creating a world where everyone feels safe, respected,
Yeah.
and empowered to to speak their truth. And it starts with each of us.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. And by shining a light on these issues, by having these difficult conversations, we can create a brighter future for everyone.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. To you, our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope this deep dive has, provided you with some valuable insights and sparked some important questions. Remember, this conversation doesn't end here.
Yeah.
Continue to seek out information, challenge assumptions, and use your voice to advocate for a more just and equitable world.